Next up then, in quite a packed afternoon, is Jeff Bell, who's going to talk to us about design. Jeff's part of Communicator, so please welcome Jeff Bell.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeff. I've probably done some work for some of you. Some of you I might not have done anything for, but I'm senior designer at Communicator and have been for the last 3 years. As I said, we design and build emails, all the way from wireframes up to the full build itself in HTML. Also advise on best practice for design, discussing things like accessibility, which I'm going to talk a lot about today, and general design tasks for Communicator. So things like putting all the slides together for this event today, which I can assure you was painful. So before we get started, I've got some good news and some bad news for you. Basically, there's going to be audience participation today. That's the bad news. The good news is it's just going to be raising your hand in the air. So I just want you to practice this now. Just everyone, hand in the air. Champion, this side of the room, hand in the air. This side of the room. When I point you, put your hand in the air. Excellent. So, accessibility. Audience participation. Hand in the air if you know what accessibility is. Anybody? Yeah, good number of people there. So, what it is, as defined by some people down there, if you can read it. Accessibility is the design of something, such as products, devices, services, or environments, so that they can be used by people with disabilities. So the types of disabilities, auditory, so things like deafness, hearing disorders, so if you wear a hearing aid, I think everyone's probably seen hearing loops in banks and things like that. There's visual, so not just things like not being able to see at all, there's colour blindness, there's glaucoma, so you might have like patches of your vision that are missing. I don't know what that was, but woo! There's motor, so things like cerebral palsy, Parkinson's, where your hand shakes. So if you've got an email on your phone and you're trying to press a really small button, how's that going to affect you if your hand's shaking? And cognitive, so things like autism, Down syndrome, dyslexia, how do these all impact email? So I think auditory, you can't really do anything about that with email, but visual, things like colour contrast, motor, like I said, Parkinson's, are your CTAs big enough? And cognitive, is your copy concise and clear enough, or is it complicated and difficult to read? So why is it important? So the UK's got a population of almost 70 million, and 11 million people in the UK have a disability. So that's those two guys right there, which is 16.24% of the population. So of that 16.24% of the population, to compare that, email client marketshare.com work out that 10% of all emails are opened on Outlook. So if you're designing for Outlook, but you're not considering disabilities, that could potentially be quite a big market that you're missing out on. So again, 2 million people in the UK are blind, so that's potentially 2 million people that interact with emails using screen readers. So that sits in between an open rate of 3% on Google Android and 2% opens on Outlook.com. So are you designing for things and making things with these devices in mind, but not thinking about people that can't visually see it? So another reason why it's important, it's a legal requirement. The Equality Act of 2010 means it's illegal to discriminate against anyone with a disability. And while nothing over here has happened yet, last month the Supreme Court in the US said a blind man could sue Domino's Pizza because he couldn't order pizza through the website. So if you think emails are very closely linked with a website, how long is it before people start looking at, are your emails accessible? Can you go to court because your emails aren't accessible? it can increase your audience. As I mentioned before, the 16% of the population of the UK has some kind of disability. If you're creating content with them in mind, that can immediately open a new audience to you that you haven't considered before. And if you empathise with the needs of your audience rather than what you want to see, that can have a huge impact on things as well. So another bit of audience participation here. Has anyone got a dog? Hand in the air. Yeah. Has anyone got a dog that hates fireworks? There's a couple of yous. So I've got a dog. That's my dog there. That's the bit where you say, "Oh." Yeah. So probably the people with dogs will know about this, but Sainsbury's didn't sell fireworks this year. Did anyone not know that? So that's something for me where Sainsbury's have looked at something and said, well, we can maybe make some profit. I don't know how much margin you make on fireworks or anything like that, but I'd imagine you make some. And they've said, well, no, let's not sell fireworks. Let's stop selling them. And they maybe's not done it for dogs, but I don't know. But they've got great engagement on social media. Like, it's just some of the tweets that I picked up when I searched for Sainsbury's and fireworks. So you've got people that are saying that they're going to start shopping at Sainsbury's now because Sainsbury's don't sell fireworks. So empathise with what your audience wants, or maybe empathise with what your audience doesn't know they want, and you might gain a whole new audience. So that was between, I think that was announced middle of October, and it was still being talked about on Twitter up until after bonfire night. So a bad user experience as well is another reason why it's important. So if you haven't got alt text on your images, and they get dynamically named, maybe it's because you've just uploaded them in a certain way, it can come across this. So this is actually delivered into my inbox, quite like US sports. So this is what it sounds like, hopefully.
Link.
Yeah.
RBK6K on 4I4G47 ISU tilde Nick GDNSL1ZP.
What does that even mean? So if you're navigating that email with a screen reader and that's what you're hearing, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to engage with it? Are you going to delete it? I think I would probably delete it if it was up to me. So here's some with poor alt text. So quite generic 600 pixels wide image. And you can't read that one, but it says turn your images on. Shop AEO.
Link image. 600px wide image. Link image. Turn images on. Shop AEO.
If you're blind, you can't turn images on. Just to point that out. Poor colour contrast is another one. The screen doesn't help at all with this, but I can assure you, even with a good screen, you probably wouldn't be able to read that. That's white text on a grey background, which even without any visual issues, that is difficult to read. So what can we do about it? It's everyone's responsibility. It's not just the responsibility of a designer. It's not just the responsibility of someone briefing in the design jobs. I'm sure there'll be many of you in here who would brief it in to your designer and say it needs to be accessible. It's not just up to you to say that. It's up to the designer to come back and say this needs to be accessible. So ultimately, it's everyone needs to think about how we can make things more accessible. So we can do this by best practice with code and design. So if there's any of you that create your emails through HTML, or you maybe get an agency to do it, by adding an attribute of role equals presentation, that'll basically tell a screen reader that this table is just meant for a layout. It's not meant to be read as a data table, which is essentially what tables in HTML were originally designed for. You can hide things from screen reader using an aria-hidden equals true. So really, if you've got images that are named RBK7693162Z, it might be best off hiding them if you're not going to use alt text. And semantic tags as well. This is things like header tags. So you'd use H1 to H6, as well as paragraph tags. Obviously, you'd style them up so that things like Outlook don't apply their automatic styling to it. Not everything's a heading. So at the beginning of this, or this slide, best practice would be the heading, and then code semantic tags, that would just be P tags that are styled up to be a bigger text. Font size and line height. 16 pixels is now widely regarded to be the minimum font size. I think a lot of older designs usually have like 12 to 14 pixels as the minimum height. But really 16, you want to make it easy to read, and the font size of 16 pixels and a line height of 1.5 make that possible. Text alignment and spacing. So text should generally be left aligned. You don't want all your text to be in the centre because it's difficult to read for people that are maybe dyslexic or have visual impairments. So you want to make sure it's all to the left. It doesn't all have to be right over to the left-hand side. You can kind of centre the container, but then left align the text. And don't be afraid to use padding as well. You've got plenty of space to use. You really want to space things out to make it really easy to differentiate between sections. If you've got a couple of paragraphs of text, you don't want to have it to be a wall of solid text, like use space between elements and things like that. Alt text, as we saw earlier, if you don't use alt text or if you don't use relevant alt text, it's going to be a nightmare for people. So don't use turn images on. And colour contrast, as we saw before, you couldn't really read that example, but just tweaking the text to like a darker colour makes that a lot more readable. That increases the readability by a huge amount. And if in doubt, there's a website you can check out, accessible-colors.com, and that'll tell you whether your contrast ratio is good or bad, basically. GIFs. Show of hands, how many people have used a GIF in an email? Quite a few. So if you think about the GIF you've used, is it just kind of flashed very quickly? Has it been an erratic transition between the different slides? Or has it been nice smoothly? Because people with things like epilepsy, that could trigger an epileptic fit for somebody if you've got a GIF that's just flashing and pulsing in a really erratic way. So in summary, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Basically, you're not going to be able to cover every disability that there is. So don't try it, because you'll just fail. The next point, any implementation is a win. So even if you just start implementing alt text and you haven't done that before, that's a win. That's something to be, maybe it's not shout about, but it's something to be proud of, something to make a start. And then you can look at the more complicated implementations that you can make. And ultimately, there's no reason not to implement accessibility. As I've said, it's a legal requirement that you don't discriminate against people, and discluding people from being able to consume your content can be classed as discrimination. And as you saw by the Domino's case, it might not be that long before that goes from websites in America to emails in the UK. And that's it. It's a bit early, so if there's any questions, I'm quite happy to take them.
So, any questions for Jeff? Yes, please. Can you wait for the mic, actually? It's a lot easier than everybody can hear the question you're asking.
So you talked about HTML emails. How would this translate into the designer? Are you going to enforce things, or like as a policy, or?
On the designer, it's not generated at the minute. To make the designer more accessible is on my wish list. It's something I've asked for to be considered. So hopefully I'd like to see it on the designer, and it's something I'll push for internally.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, at the back. If you wait for the mic, great.
Is accessibility just the latest trend in emails?
No, I think accessibility, it's going to be a bit like what responsive emails started off as. I think back in 2012, responsive email was a very pushing edge thing. It wasn't the main thing, but now responsive emails are pretty much standard, and I think as it progresses, accessible emails will become the new standard. That'll be something that everyone that'll be the way you code from then on.
Got a question. It's more of a statement. The slide example that you used for the bad example with the colors, that was ours. I didn't actually use that one. I was testing out different color schemes.
All right.
That was in the design template. It wasn't actually being used.
It was brave of you to admit it.
Yeah. It's going to come up later, so.
Great. Any other questions? I've got one or two for Jeff myself. Okay. Yes, please, yeah.
If somebody's not really considered accessibility before, how would you suggest sort of tackling potentially quite a large project? Is it quite a systematic way of going about it, or what would you maybe look at first?
I think that depends on. There's a lot of factors to figure in there. I think maybe you should start with one of the emails to begin with, and you can see what changes would need to be made to that single one, and then is that something that are those the same changes that you'd need to make throughout, or is each kind of email going to be its own individual case? I don't think there's one size fits all approach to tackling it. It would just be a case of maybe if you use templates to start at the top and work your way down, or if you use modular design to just go through the modules and implement the best practice for the code, and then look at the design and color contrast and things like that.
Hi there, thanks very much, it was really interesting. I wanted to ask about screen readers. So that was the most new thing in the presentation for me, and I was wondering whether there's any free programs that we can download so that we can put our emails into it and see whether they're any good. Like, how does one find out what a screen reader reads off my email?
You can probably find them by looking. I think I just use the VoiceOver, which is the default one that comes with a Mac. A plug for Macs there. If anybody from Apple wants to send us a free one, just on YouTube. I just use VoiceOver. I think VoiceOver is probably one of the most advanced ones. So you maybe wouldn't see table equals presentation making a difference with that, but some other voice readers, they would find it difficult to break the content down if it doesn't have that. But I can kind of look through and find some kind of resources to send across to you if you'd like that. Yeah.
I think most browsers have either built in or there'll be apps or some description that you can download free.
Yeah.
Can I ask one, Jeff, whilst we're waiting for the next one? You say it's a speculation thing. It's a reasonable speculation. If Domino's are in trouble because of a website not working, email seems logically the next thing, and rather it be the next fashion. I've got a kind of question in two parts. Do you think that's going to happen in the next 10 years? It's going to happen big style. And also, if you take the ageing population of Britain, and if you take the profile of Britain, in another 10, 15 years, we're going to have a lot more people who are in their 80s and 90s. In fact, as we speak, there are more people aged 80 now than have ever been 80 in the past. And they might not be classed as disabled, they might be classed as blind, but they are a little hard of hearing, and sight is more difficult. Do you think anyway it'll just become natural will be expecting emails to be sound. Is that in the next 10 or 15 years, or is that fair? Is that...
I think that's maybe a more complicated question of the future of emails, which I don't know if they'd maybe just become like kind of voicemails or anything like that. I wouldn't imagine so in the next 10 years. But I think it will become a lot more commonplace for them to be accessible through voice readers.
It seems a reasonable assumption, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's happening whether we like it or not. Okay.
Yeah.
And my final question, and see if there's anybody else got another question, is about the colours. I've done over the years a bit of research on colours and what we like and what's regarded upmarket, downmarket and so on. And so in this country, it might be different in America, but a rich burgundy purple colour is regarded as expensive, and I called it Harrods green, you know, that kind of after 8 mints green, that's regarded as expensive, and cream as well, whereas red and orange aren't regarded as being expensive but do work. As a designer, do you find that certain colours work better than others? It's a little bit off piece from what you were talking about. I'm just interested in the colour thing, and again, what people can get out. Are there colours that work and don't work as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I think there's scientific evidence that proves I think blue is the best colour to use for call to actions.
Okay.
I think obviously some brands don't have blue in the colour palette, so they can replace it. But I think things like red and green are kind of, it's an automatic response where if you see something red, you'd maybe think warning or danger.
Yeah.
Whereas
Or
green,
sale.
Yeah, or green, you think like a tick.
Yes.
Or it's approved, something like that.
Yeah.
But,
So all that is incorporated in your work, presumably?
yeah.
Great. Any other questions for Jeff then, before we finish? Oh, we're doing great. A round of applause for Jeff then. Thanks very much.